Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. And I used to think our apartment sounded like a happy place. The dishwasher's soft hum after dinner, traffic washing past the windows, the way Lena sang along to old playlists while sorting mail at the counter. Those tiny noises felt like proof that we were building something real. When she said yes to my proposal last fall, I believed stability had finally moved in with us. Friends sent balloons. Both families exchanged holiday recipes, and we slipped into that engaged rhythm where calendars fill with cake tastings, venue tours, and texts about table linens that somehow matter more than politics. I met Jake once at a neighborhood cookout. He was the sort of guy who leaned on furniture like he owned it. Friendly enough, quick with a joke, dressed like he always just left a gym even when the weather begged for a jacket. Lena called him a casual buddy from her marketing team. They worked late, she said, because a campaign had gone sideways. I nodded, took her at her word, and added, "Invite Jake +1 to our guest list." That should have been a clue by itself. How easily I accepted people into our lives without asking harder questions. I trusted my fiancée. I trusted the future. I trusted that the savings account we were draining into a wedding would pay us back with a long, steady life. Tiny things began to wobble. She set her phone face down more often. She laughed at messages and said they were from a group chat I never saw. A new perfume appeared, citrus with a stubborn sweetness. And she wore it on Tuesdays, the night she said she needed to stay at work. I asked if everything felt okay. She kissed my cheek and told me not to worry. We were stressed, that was all. I decided to believe her because believing meant sleep came easier, and the florist didn't start to look like a bad bet. On a rainy Thursday in March, I left the office early, a small victory over spreadsheets. I grabbed takeout from the Thai place she liked, imagining the two of us with paper cartons on the couch, watching that documentary she'd saved. Her car wasn't in the lot, no problem. I set the food out, lit a candle, and texted her a photo. She replied with a thumbs up and a promise that she'd be home by 8. At 9, I heard nothing. At 10, a message blinked onto my screen like a soft alarm, all cheerful punctuation and false casual tone. "I'll be staying at Jake's tonight, don't wait up." I stared at the sentence, not understanding its gravity at first. Maybe a group of co-workers had ended up at his place after a late shift. Maybe she meant several friends. The rational mind builds bridges even when the river below roars. I typed back, "Thanks for letting me know." My thumb hovered, expecting elaboration, an immediate explanation, a quick clause proving innocence. Nothing followed. The silent phone rested in my palm, warm from my skin. I set it down and looked around our dining room. The little vase with supermarket tulips, the pile of invitation samples, the board on the wall where we pinned ideas for an affordable honeymoon. That board felt like a confession. We were designing a life with double-sided tape. I cleaned up the food, blew out the candle, and opened a beer I didn't really want. A steady ache spread through my chest, not sharp enough to be dramatic, just stubborn enough to make me think slowly. I wasn't the shouting type. I wasn't the keying cars, public scene type. But I was practical, and I understood statements made without words. Her message made one. I owed myself a reply of the same language. Maybe that sounds cold. Maybe you think I should have called her, demanded context, begged for a different story. I thought about it. I imagined us arguing in half-truths until midnight. I saw her swearing it was nothing, promising a taxi home in 10 minutes, wiping tears with the back of her hand while she apologized for the wrong optics. But I also pictured the wedding deposit sitting like a dare in our bank account and the versions of myself, 15 years from now, tired and suspicious, wishing I had listened to the first honest sentence she sent in months. So I chose a calm that felt like steel. I pulled the big plastic bins down from the hall closet, the ones we used during our last move. I wanted to keep my hands busy. I wanted to do something that made sense. In our bedroom, the closet yawned open with her favorite dresses on one side and my work shirts on the other, polite neighbors. I started with sweaters, folding them carefully, not angrily, as if I were helping a friend move. Next went the jeans, the skirts, the blouses she loved for presentations. I packed shoes in pairs, matching each scuffed heel to its mate. I found the box for her jewelry, simple pieces, nothing extravagant, and placed it on top of a pile like a cherry on a sundae. The apartment grew quieter as I worked, almost meditative. I didn't break anything. I didn't throw away sentimental items. I treated every scarf and jacket like property to be respected. Maybe that strikes you as odd for a man planning revenge. To me, it felt like the sharpest point of my message. Not rage, not chaos, just finality. She had sent a choice in a sentence. I answered by making that choice visible. By midnight, the bins filled the hallway. I labeled each one with sticky notes, writing with the neatness I use for mailing labels. If she came home tomorrow, she would find an orderly exit waiting. As I looked around the place, I noticed how many small pieces of her would remain. A cookbook with her grandmother's inscription, a snow globe from a childhood trip, a photo of us at the county fair where my hair looks ridiculous. Those items I left where they were. You don't erase history just because the road changed directions. You keep a record, even if it stings. I wheeled the bins to the elevator one by one, wishing the building had a service cart. The night manager gave me a curious glance. I told him I was dropping things at a friend's place. The air outside smelled like wet asphalt and electric lines. I loaded the trunk and back seat, then typed Jake's address into my phone. I had it because we once dropped a gift there after a team promotion. I remembered his apartment, high ceilings, a patio full of plants he barely watered, a doormat that said, welcome-ish. The drive took 15 minutes and felt longer, the city gliding past in blurry grids. His building had a sheltered front step. I stacked the bins carefully, not blocking the doorway but impossible to miss. On top, I set a small envelope with her name. Inside, I copied her message by hand and added a single sentence. Your things are with you. That was all. No insults. No threats. Just clarity. I took a photo for my records, not to post anywhere, not to humiliate anyone publicly, but to confirm to myself that I was not dreaming. Then I rang his buzzer and walked back to the car before anyone answered. The quiet inside the sedan felt enormous. I sat there, engine off, listening to rain thicken on the windshield. I wondered what story they would tell each other when they found the bins. Would they laugh, say I was overreacting, bring everything upstairs and make it a weekend project? Would she call immediately, furious that I touched her belongings? Would he shrug and lock the door while they tried to sleep? I didn't know, and for once, not knowing felt like a border I should respect. I drove home, parked, and climbed the stairs with just my keys. At 2:30, my phone vibrated. Then again. Then again. Her name filled the screen with a stream of calls and short texts, increasingly urgent. The first one said, "Where are my clothes?" The second said, "What are you doing?" The third contained a longer plea and the wet shine of panic. I placed the phone face down on the nightstand and lay on my back, eyes open to the shifting ceiling shadows. I wasn't gloating, I wasn't celebrating. I was holding a line that suddenly felt like the only thing keeping me from a future of excuses. At 3, the calls became relentless. She sent a photo of the bins stacked outside the building, accusing me of humiliating her. She typed paragraphs about the weather, about how this wasn't safe, about how she couldn't bring everything inside because Jake's roommate worked nights and needed silence. I stayed still, breathing evenly, letting the vibration buzz like a distant appliance. It's funny how the body remembers old skills. I used to lifeguard in high school, and part of the training taught us to be calm when someone flailed. The worst thing you can do is thrash with them. Let the water settle. Guide gently. Hold steady. I thought about our wedding invitations waiting in the top desk drawer, the ones with our names looped together in cursive. I thought about the time we drove through upstate apple orchards and laughed after getting lost on back roads that ended at a barn painted with cartoon cows. I thought about the first night years ago when she fell asleep on my shoulder during a movie marathon, and I wrapped a blanket around both of us, a simple promise made with fleece. None of those memories complicated the truth sitting beside me. She had told me where she wanted to be. I had honored that. There's dignity in accepting an answer even when you hate it. By 4, the messages shifted tone. Apologies arrived, then explanations that looked rehearsed, then blame shaped into careful sentences. She wasn't feeling safe in the moment, she said, and I was making everything worse. She said she only needed a place to crash because she'd missed the last train home after a group dinner. She emphasized that nothing inappropriate had happened. She underlined, virtually, that I was the man she planned to marry, that this was a misunderstanding ignited by fatigue. A part of me, soft, scared, wanted to dial her back and say, "Come home, we'll talk, we'll figure it out." But that part had been steering long enough. I slept in shallow loops until dawn lightened the edges of the curtains. The world outside resumed its routines. Dog walkers passed below, a delivery truck idled at the corner. The smell of coffee drifted from a neighbor's kitchen. My phone sat there, a dark rectangle of unread pleas. I made breakfast because a body needs fuel to make smart choices. Toast, eggs, fruit, simple. When I finally picked up the phone, I scrolled without opening the thread. The number of messages alone could have filled a novella. I didn't craft a speech. I didn't ask leading questions. I typed a polite note telling her that the spare key would no longer work by evening and that we should meet in a public place later to talk about logistics. I suggested a quiet cafe near the river. I told her I believed in calm conversations and fair divisions. Then I set the phone down again and took the trash out, the same as any morning, because even when everything changes, the bin in the kitchen still needs emptying. While I stood by the chute, the ring on my finger, simple titanium, a match for hers, caught the light. The glint looked like a question. I wasn't ready to answer it fully, not yet. I knew only that the life I'd imagined would not resume on schedule. And somewhere across town, on a sheltered stoop, a stack of labeled bins waited for someone else to own the choice she'd made. That was part of the truth too. I had not yelled, I had not insulted, I had not slammed any doors. I had simply opened one and carried boxes through it. By mid-morning, after a shower that felt like a reset, I walked to the cafe and picked a table by the window. I ordered 2 cups, hers the oat milk latte she liked, mine black. I didn't know if she would show, but if she did, the drinks would already be there, like a script for people who wanted to treat each other kindly while ending something that had gotten tangled. I watched the river slide under the bridge, wondering how many conversations like ours unfolded in this city every day. People, learning in real time how to choose dignity over drama. The bell on the door chimed. I recognized that citrus perfume before I saw her. She stood just inside, unsure, scanning the room, then found my eyes. She looked smaller than usual, like the night had siphoned off some of her brightness. She walked over, set her phone face down, and wrapped both hands around the latte I'd ordered. "We need to talk," she said, voice steady but tight. I nodded once, ready to hear everything. Ready to speak when it was my turn. Ready to keep the moment free of noise. What I didn't know then, as the river kept moving outside, was how many truths were still waiting to surface, and how carefully I would need to hold my calm when they did. She sat across from me with her fingers wrapped around the latte like it was the only warm thing in her life. For a while, neither of us spoke. The cafe buzzed softly with clinking cups, quiet conversations, and the hiss of milk steaming. Outside, the river rolled past, the city continuing as if nothing monumental was happening. But for me, everything had shifted. The woman I had chosen to build a life with now sat before me, carrying the weight of choices she thought I didn't see until last night. She started first, words tumbling fast. She said it wasn't what it looked like, that she had only stayed because the train stopped running, and Jake offered his couch. She explained how deadlines had kept them working late, how exhaustion blurred her judgment. She used the word misunderstanding more than once, and every time it sounded thinner, like fabric stretched too far. I let her talk, not interrupting, just listening. My silence seemed to unnerve her more than if I'd raised my voice. She expected anger, maybe shouting, maybe even accusations. Instead, she found patience, and patience can sometimes cut sharper than rage. When she paused to sip her latte, I leaned in slightly and said, "You didn't misunderstand me last night. You told me where you wanted to be." Her eyes flickered, and in that instant, I knew the truth wasn't in her words. It was in that hesitation, the tiny crack that showed more than any story she built. She set her cup down too hard, the saucer clinking. She insisted again that I was overreacting, that moving her clothes was cruel, unnecessary. I nodded calmly and replied, "Cruel would have been screaming or making a scene. This was clarity. You made a choice, and I respected it." She tried shifting the blame. She said I'd been distant, that maybe she felt lonely while I focused too much on work. She said Jake had been there, filling space I had left empty. Hearing it, I didn't deny I'd worked long hours. That stress had bent me in ways I hadn't noticed. But relationships don't break because of hours at the office. They break when someone decides to fill those hours with another person. I told her that. Her lips pressed tight, and for a moment she had no answer. We sat in that cafe for nearly an hour. She swung between tears and defiance, excuses and apologies. I stayed steady, explaining that I didn't want to live in a story where I was the last to know the truth. I wanted respect, and if respect couldn't be given, then at least honesty. She kept insisting she loved me, that she wanted our wedding, that she wanted to fix this. But every sentence felt like a patch on a sinking boat, and I wasn't about to climb aboard again. Finally, I told her calmly, "The key won't work after today. You'll have time to pick up the rest of your things this weekend. After that, we need space." She stared at me, shocked that I wasn't bargaining, wasn't negotiating for her affection. She asked if I was really going to throw away years together over one mistake. I shook my head and answered, "You didn't make one mistake. You made a choice. The only thing I'm doing is respecting it." Her shoulders slumped then, and for the first time she looked like someone realizing a door had closed. She whispered, something about not meaning to lose me, about not realizing what she had risked. I almost softened, almost. But then I remembered the buzzing phone at 3 a.m., the lies wrapped in casual texts, and the nights she came home with that citrus perfume. Choices stack up, I told myself, and this was simply the bill arriving. We parted outside. She walked one way along the river, head bent low, and I walked the other. The city air felt different, sharper, like the morning after a storm when the sky clears but debris still lines the streets. I wasn't happy, not exactly, but I was free. Free from waiting up at night, free from second-guessing explanations, free from the quiet erosion of trust, and freedom, even when it hurts, feels cleaner than doubt. That evening, I changed the locks. I boxed up the last few items she had left, a photo album, some kitchen gadgets, a stack of old novels, and left them by the door for her to collect. My apartment felt lighter, even with empty shelves and gaps in the closet. I cooked myself dinner, not a grand meal, just something simple, and ate in silence. The quiet no longer felt ominous. It felt like space to breathe. In the days that followed, friends reached out. Some had seen her with Jake at bars, laughing too closely, and admitted they hadn't known how to tell me. Others said they were proud I'd handled it with calm instead of chaos. A few even joked that my box delivery was the cleanest revenge they'd ever heard of. I didn't call it revenge. To me, it was self-respect. It was refusing to fight for someone who had already chosen another battlefield. By the end of the week, Lena had moved out completely. She texted once more, a long message about regret and second chances. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the only language left when words have been emptied of truth. And in that silence I found something unexpected, peace. Not joy, not yet, but the first step toward rebuilding without lies. And maybe one day, when the sting fades, I'll look back on that night, the night she texted me that simple sentence, and realize it wasn't the end of my story. It was just the turning point where I finally decided to write it myself. The weeks after she left felt strangely quiet, but not in the suffocating way I'd expected. At first, there were echoes, her favorite mug on the counter, the dent in the couch cushion where she used to curl up, the playlist that still shuffled her songs. But little by little, the apartment stopped sounding like her absence and started sounding like my life again. I cooked for one and learned to enjoy it. I rearranged the living room, just enough to make it feel like a fresh start. And one Saturday morning, I stood in front of the closet and realized that the space where her clothes had hung no longer felt like a gap. It felt like room to grow. Friends invited me out more often, partly to distract me, partly because they saw I was willing to laugh again. At first, I declined. I thought solitude was safer. But eventually I went, and those nights reminded me that loyalty still existed, that trust didn't die with one broken relationship. My best friend clapped me on the back and said, "Man, you handled that like a pro. No drama, no flames, just clean." And I realized he was right. I hadn't lost myself in the process. I had walked away with my dignity intact. One evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the city lights flicker, my phone buzzed. Another message from her. It wasn't angry this time, not pleading either, just a short note saying she hoped I was doing okay. I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. Not out of bitterness, but because I finally understood something. Her opinion of me no longer mattered. My story no longer needed her footnotes. Life didn't transform overnight, but subtle shifts began to build. I started running again in the mornings, something I hadn't made time for in years. I called my parents more often. I even signed up for a cooking class, not because I needed it, but because it felt good to invest in myself again. And every small step reminded me that revenge wasn't really the heart of what happened that night. The heart of it was reclaiming my peace. By the end of the summer, the apartment had shed the weight of memory. A new rug, some fresh paint, and suddenly the place didn't feel like the stage of a failed engagement. It felt like the first chapter of something better. People sometimes asked if I'd forgiven her. I always said yes, because forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me. Carrying anger would have tied me to a story I no longer wanted to live. Letting go meant walking lighter. Looking back now, I don't think about the boxes stacked outside Jake's door as an act of cruelty. I think of them as a boundary drawn with clarity. She sent a message that night telling me where she wanted to be. I sent one back without words, showing her where I stood. And when the dust settled, I discovered something valuable. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't fire or fury. Sometimes it's silence, composure, and the decision to walk away without looking back. Because in the end, she didn't just lose her wardrobe. She lost the chance to stand beside someone who would have given her everything. And I walked away with the one thing worth more than any wedding, more than any promise she had broken: my self-respect. And that was how it ended. Not with shouting, not with broken promises tossed like weapons, but with quiet decisions and clear boundaries. She chose her path, and I chose mine. In the end, the boxes left on Jake's doorstep weren't just clothes. They were the line that separated my past from my future. Now I have to ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed calm the way I did, or would you have handled it differently? Do you think silence was the strongest response, or should I have confronted her right then and there? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want more like it, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment, and of course subscribe so you never miss the next one. Your support means a lot and keeps these stories coming.